The Whispering Jungle. It was a crisp autumn evening when 4 friends, Emma, Ryan, Sophie, and Liam, decided to go camping deep in the Whispering Jungle. Locals had warned them about the forest, claiming it was cursed, but the group dismissed the stories as folklore. They were seasoned adventurers, after all, and the thrill of exploring the unknown was irresistible. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the jungle grew eerily quiet. The group set up their tents near a small clearing, their laughter breaking the silence as they shared ghost stories around a crackling fire. Shadows danced on the trees, and the occasional rustle of leaves hinted at unseen creatures lurking in the darkness. At midnight, the atmosphere shifted. The once warm glow of the fire seemed to dim, and a chilling wind swept through the clearing, carrying with it a faint, disembodied whisper. "Did you hear that?" Emma asked, her voice trembling. "Probably just the wind," Liam replied, though his uneasy expression betrayed his words. The whispers grew louder, more distinct. They didn't come from one direction, but seemed to encircle them, like invisible figures muttering just out of reach. The words were unintelligible, but filled with a sinister cadence that made the hair on their necks stand on end. Sophie pointed toward the edge of the clearing. "What's that?" she gasped. The others turned to see a figure standing among the trees, a pale silhouette that seemed to flicker like a dying candle. Its hollow eyes stared at them, unblinking. The whispers grew deafening, and the air felt heavy, pressing down on their chests. Ryan grabbed a flashlight and shone it toward the figure, but the beam seemed to bend around it, as if the light refused to touch it. Panic set in as the group huddled together. "We need to leave. Now," Sophie whispered, her voice shaking. As they scrambled to pack their belongings, the whispers morphed into anguished cries. Shadows slithered across the ground, forming twisted shapes that lunged at their feet. Emma screamed as an icy hand seemed to brush her arm, leaving a red mark that burned like fire. They bolted into the jungle, guided only by the faint glow of their flashlights. The path they had taken earlier was unrecognizable, replaced by gnarled roots and dense thickets. The cries followed them, echoing through the trees. "Keep running," Liam shouted, though his voice was almost drowned out by the cacophony. Suddenly, the ground gave way beneath Ryan, and he plunged into a shallow pit. The others stopped, pulling him out, but his ankle was twisted, and he could barely stand. They supported him as best they could, the whispers now a chorus of mocking laughter. Just when it seemed they would be swallowed by the darkness, they stumbled into a clearing bathed in moonlight. The whispers ceased abruptly, leaving an oppressive silence. Exhausted and terrified, they collapsed onto the ground. By dawn, they found their way back to the edge of the jungle. But none of them spoke about what had happened, not even to each other. They knew they had been marked by the Whispering Jungle, and the memory of that night would haunt them forever. Some say, if you listen closely at midnight near the jungle, you can still hear the whispers, calling for the ones who dared to leave. Weeks passed since the group escaped the Whispering Jungle, but none of them felt truly free. The whispers still haunted them, faint but persistent, creeping into their minds during the quiet moments of the day. Emma began to notice strange symbols etched into her skin, faint, jagged lines that appeared overnight and burned like frostbite. Liam's shadow didn't always follow his movements. Sophie started sleepwalking, waking up outside her home without memory of how she got there. And Ryan? His injury refused to heal, turning a sickly shade of black. One evening, Emma gathered them at her apartment. "Something followed us out of that jungle," she said, her voice trembling. "And it's getting worse." Liam nodded, staring at his shadow on the wall. It flickered unnaturally, like a candle's flame. "We need help. We can't just ignore this." Ryan, pale and sweating, winced as he shifted in his seat. "There's an old woman in the village near the jungle. Locals say she knows the truth about the forest. We should go back and find her." Despite their fear, they agreed. Armed with flashlights, maps, and the courage born of desperation, they returned to the village at the edge of the jungle. The locals were wary, whispering warnings as they passed, but eventually, they found the old woman. Her hut was filled with charms and talismans, and the air smelled of burning sage. "You should not have gone there," the woman said without greeting them. Her cloudy eyes seemed to see right through them. "The jungle does not forgive trespassers." We didn't know, Sophie pleaded. Please, tell us how to stop this. The woman's face darkened. You have been marked. The jungle claims those who hear its whispers. The spirits you disturbed will not rest until you return what was taken. What was taken? Emma asked, confused. The woman handed them an old, tattered map. Find the altar deep within the jungle. Place an offering, something precious to each of you, on its stone. Only then will the spirits consider mercy. The group left at dawn, armed with supplies and the map. The jungle seemed even more foreboding than before, its dense canopy swallowing sunlight. The whispers began almost immediately, faint but mocking, as if the spirits already knew they had returned. After hours of trudging through the undergrowth, they found the altar. A massive stone slab covered in ancient carvings, surrounded by twisted roots and decayed offerings from others who had sought the spirits' forgiveness. One by one, they placed their offerings. Emma left her grandmother's locket, the last connection to her family. Ryan offered his journal, filled with stories he had written since childhood. Sophie sacrificed her engagement ring, a promise of a future she might never have. And Liam laid down his compass, the tool that had guided him on every adventure. The jungle went deathly silent. For a moment, it seemed as though they had succeeded. But then the earth trembled, and the whispers rose again, louder and angrier than ever. The offerings are not enough, a voice boomed, disembodied and echoing through the trees. The group turned, horrified, as shadows emerged from the jungle, taking the shape of twisted humanoid figures. You must give more, the voice said, its tone colder than death. One of you must stay. The shadowy figures advanced, their hollow eyes glowing with a malevolent light. The group froze, their breaths caught in their throats. The jungle seemed alive now. Branches reached like skeletal hands, and the ground beneath them pulsed as though it had a heartbeat. What do you mean, one of us must stay? Sophie shouted, her voice cracking. A low, guttural laugh echoed around them. The disembodied voice spoke again. One life to pay for your trespass. Only then will the jungle release its grip. No, Emma whispered, shaking her head. There has to be another way. The shadows didn't waver, their forms circling the group like vultures around prey. Liam clenched his fists, his mind racing. We're not doing this, he growled. We leave together, or not at all. But Ryan, pale and sweating, limped forward. It has to be me, he said, his voice steady despite his trembling hands. Don't be ridiculous, Emma cried, grabbing his arm. Ryan shook his head. I'm the one who slowed us down. If I hadn't fallen into that pit, we could have escaped faster. This is my fault. No, it's not, Sophie said, tears streaming down her face. We all went in together. We made the same choice. The shadows stopped, waiting in eerie silence, as if savoring their indecision. Ryan took a deep breath and stepped closer to the altar. If someone has to stay, it should be me. I'm not going to let this curse ruin all of our lives. Before the others could stop him, he placed both hands on the stone altar. The jungle seemed to exhale, the air growing colder. The shadows surged toward him, wrapping around his body like smoke. Ryan, Sophie screamed, lunging forward, but Liam held her back. Ryan turned his head, offering a weak smile. It's okay, live your lives. And don't forget me. The shadows consumed him completely, and with a final, guttural roar, they vanished into the jungle. The whispers stopped, leaving behind an oppressive silence. The three remaining friends stood frozen, their minds struggling to process what had just happened. The jungle, now eerily still, seemed to have lost its sinister presence. The carvings on the altar faded, and the jungle appeared almost ordinary. Let's go, Liam said softly, his voice breaking. They stumbled out of the jungle at dawn, their bodies and spirits battered. The villagers who saw them knew what had transpired, their solemn expressions offering a quiet understanding. Weeks turned into months, and life slowly moved on. The whispers no longer haunted them, but Ryan's sacrifice lingered in their hearts. Every year, on the anniversary of that night, the three friends returned to the edge of the jungle. They left offerings at the boundary, not to appease the spirits, but to honor Ryan's memory. The whispering jungle never called to them again. But as they placed the offerings and whispered their goodbyes, they swore they could feel a faint presence watching, a comforting one. Ryan was still with them in some small way, and they would never forget.